Dogs Don't Tell Jokes by Louis Sachar. 5. Why did the boy wear a diaper to the party? Because he didn't want to be a party pooper. No matter how many times Gary read it, that joke always made him laugh. He was sitting in his room, going through one of his joke books. There were 28 books on Gary's bookcase. 25 of them were joke books. He also had a dictionary, a book called Sideways Arithmetic from Wayside School, which he didn't understand, and a novel about a pirate that Angeline had given him a long time ago that he'd never read. "Can I say pooper at school?" he asked aloud. On the walls of his room were posters of famous comedians: W.C. Fields playing poker, Woody Allen playing the clarinet, Whoopi Goldberg jumping in the air, and one of Robin Williams and Jonathan Winters standing side by side, each trying to look sillier than the other. He'd once noticed that many of his famous comedians had a name that began with the letter W. That was why he always signed his name Gary W. Boone. If anybody asked, he would say his middle name was Wolfgang, but nobody ever asked. Maybe, he considered, I could go up on stage wearing a diaper. "Hi, my name is Goon. It's wonderful to be here today." Everybody would already be laughing because of the diaper. You're probably wondering why I'm wearing this diaper. Pause, 1, 2, 3. I don't want to be a party pooper. He had once watched a television show where 4 real comedians talked about how to be a stand-up comedian. They all agreed that timing was the most important factor. You should never rush your punchline. As one of the comedians said, no matter how funny a joke was, it would bomb like a rotten egg if the timing wasn't right. He said that he always paused and counted to 3 before delivering the punchline. "Would I really wear a diaper to school?" Gary asked. He shrugged. Sure, why not? Except it wasn't a party, it was a talent show. So party pooper wouldn't make sense. Or maybe that would just make it even funnier. He'd have to think about it. He continued to look through the joke book. Why shouldn't you write on an empty stomach? Because it's better to write on paper. He wondered how many jokes he'd need. He didn't know how much time he'd have. Normally a stand-up comic has to fill 8 minutes, but it might be different for a school talent show. He didn't know how long it took for him to tell a joke, and how much time should he allow for laughter. How do you tell a rooster from a hen? You toss some corn on the ground. If he eats it, he's a rooster. If she eats it, she's a hen. Of course, there was more to it, he realized, than just looking through joke books and finding 15 or 20 funny jokes. The jokes had to be related. One joke had to lead into the next. Segue was what the real comedians had called it. So after the joke about the hen, he thought he could tell jokes about other animals. Speaking of animals, did you hear about the frog jumping contest? My father won. Pause. 1, 2, 3. He was able to jump over 35 frogs. In his joke book, it was someone named Mr. Jones who jumped over 35 frogs, but on television, comics all agreed it was best to personalize your jokes. You should use members of your family whenever possible. It was too bad, he thought, that he wasn't old enough to have a mother-in-law. Then he could say his mother-in-law won the frog jumping contest. But seriously, folks, everyone in my family is a good jumper. In fact, I myself can jump higher than my house. I can jump 3 feet high. Pause. 1, 2, 3. My house can't jump at all. No, instead of saying he could jump 3 feet high, he realized it would be better if he jumped up right there on stage. It's better if a stand-up comedian is able to move around and do things rather than just stand up. What do you do when your nose goes on strike? Gary's heart jumped. He heard someone enter the room. He slowly closed his joke book. "What are you doing?" asked his mother. He turned around and smiled at her. His parents had a rule. He wasn't allowed to look at his joke books until he finished all his homework. "I don't suppose that's schoolwork," his mother said. "Sort of," said Gary. It is for school." People always told Gary he looked exactly like his mother, which bothered him a little bit. Not because his mother wasn't nice looking, but because he didn't want to look like a 44-year-old woman. They had the same round face and wide mouth. Their noses were just a bit flat, and they both had small darting eyes. He told her about the talent show. "I think that's wonderful," said his mother in a way that didn't sound like she thought it was wonderful. "First prize is $100, said Gary. His mother wasn't impressed. "Well, I hope you win," she said, "but your homework comes first. Otherwise, I'm going to take all these stupid joke books and throw them in the trash. I'm not kidding." "But this is really important," said Gary. "It's just as important as any of my other schoolwork. In fact," excuse me, "it's more important. It is. When I grow up, I'm going to be a stand-up comic. I won't need to know history or math for that." "That's fine," said his mother, "but right now, I don't want you looking at a joke book until you finish your homework. You know, you're really going to feel silly one day when I'm a famous comedian." His mother smiled. "I hope you're right," she said. This time she sounded like she really did hope he was right, but maybe it was his only hope. "So, Mom," he said, "what do you do when your nose goes on strike?" His mother had already started out the door. "Pick it," she said without turning around. She'd heard it before. She'd heard them all before. And that is the end of chapter 5.